Hello guys, welcome back. Today we're going to do some problem practice on the chemical test. So by no means that all of these questions are going to show up in your exam or not, but these are some of the guidelines on what possible questions might be asked in the exam. So for the first question, let's try to see this. Describe a test for they can put in any gas that they want, which is hydrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, chlorine, or ammonia gas. Since this is a describe type of question, you need to tell them what you are going to do. Let's say for hydrogen, right? So if you are going to test for hydrogen, what you're going to do is take your splint near the mouth of the test tube, okay? And if the test tube involves hydrogen gas, it's going to explode with a squeaky pop. Okay, the hydrogen will explode with squeaky pop. And let's say if your test is for oxygen, what you will do is take your splint near the test tube and it will reignite. Okay, it will relight the glowing splint. In the same way, for carbon dioxide, chlorine, or ammonia gas, if it is a describe type of question, you need to tell them what you're going to do. Second question, give a test to show that the unknown chemical compound contains lithium, sodium, potassium, or calcium ions. Let's see, right? Let's try to put lithium iodide, okay? Or it could be anything, but let's just say that they want you to show that lithium iodide contains lithium ions. So since you know that lithium, sodium, potassium, and calcium are highly reactive, we're going to do a flame test on it. So this is give a test, and it's not enough. You need to let them know that what color that you're expected to see. So when you do a flame test, if it was lithium, it's going to show a red color. Alright, so you get 1 mark for this, you get 1 mark for this, and a total of 2 marks for your entire question. So these questions will normally carry around 2 marks or 3 marks. Alright, so the third question, give a test to show that your unknown chemical compound contains chloride, bromide, or iodide ions. So when these questions show up, note that these are negative ions, Cl minus, Br minus, I minus, right? So the test that you're going to do is first add dilute nitric acid, okay, to your unknown chemical compound. Let's give an example here, okay? We can say that it is, let's say, sodium iodide, right? So first you're going to add dilute nitric acid to remove the impurities, and afterwards you're going to add silver nitrate to your solution, okay? And in exams, if you're not sure what your product is going to be, you can simply try to write down a short equation by your side, okay? Let's say sodium iodide plus silver nitrate will react to give silver iodide plus sodium nitrate. And from the lesson video, you know that silver iodide will give you a yellow precipitate. Okay, so it means that if you form a yellow precipitate, you know that it contains iodide ions. So if you have, let's say, NaCl, okay, so what precipitate color is going to form? It's going to form a white precipitate. But your description of your test should include adding dilute nitric acid as your first step to remove impurities, and the second step is to add silver nitrate, and the third step is to write down whichever precipitate you form. In this case, it is silver chloride, and you need to mention to them what the color of the precipitate is. Now, this is a question that most students find it to be challenging because they are giving you a range of chemical compounds. A technician finds a white solid in an unlabeled beaker. and she knows that the solid is one of the following substances, which could be potassium chloride, potassium sulfate, sodium chloride, or sodium sulfate. Now, describe how the technician can use chemical tests to identify the solid. So when these questions come, you have to separate your compounds into to cations, which is positive ions, and then anions, which are negative ions, because you cannot test them out at the same time. Okay, so if you want to test for your cations, take a look at your cations first. I'm going to draw a line in between. Okay, so your cations is between potassium and sodium. So to differentiate potassium and sodium, you can use a simple flame test. Okay. Alright, so you get 1 mark for mentioning that you're doing a flame test, and you're going to get you need to obtain 2 more marks for telling them the correct flame color. Alright, when you do a flame test, if it is potassium ion and if it was sodium ion, right? So if you have a potassium ion, it will show a lilac flame, and if you have a sodium ion, it will show a yellow flame. Alright, so you get another mark for mentioning this, you get another mark for mentioning this. Know that these type of questions carry around 6 marks. Okay. Alright, so the test for anions, let's take a look at this. You have chloride and sulfate. Okay, so if you have a chloride and sulfate, you can either test for chloride or you can either test for sulfate. So if you want to test for sulfate, what you would do is add dilute nitric acid to your white solid to clear the impurities. Afterwards, you're going to add silver nitrate, and if your precipitate has a white color, it will mean that you have AgCl, silver chloride, which is your chloride ion. And if you don't have any precipitate or no white precipitate, it means that it is not SO42 minus or sulfate ions. So this is a way of checking it, but there's another way for this question. Okay, you can either answer this or you can take the sulfate approach. Okay, which would be that add dilute hydrochloric acid to your salt solution first. Okay, just to remove the impurities. Afterwards, you're going in step 2, you're going to add barium chloride. So if it has sulfate ions, right, it will form barium sulfate, which is a white precipitate. But if you have a chloride, there won't be any precipitate, because of course you're using barium chloride as well. So these are both ways to answer the questions. So where you will get your mark is to mentioning that add dilute nitric acid to remove impurities, and then adding silver nitrate, and then mentioning the difference between these two. If you have a chloride, you will form a white silver chloride precipitate. If there is no precipitate, then it means that there is no sulfate. Okay. Similarly, if you take the bottom approach, for adding dilute hydrochloric acid, you get 1 mark. For adding barium chloride, you get another mark. And for mentioning the difference between the two, you get another mark. So try to score all 6 points without losing if you already know all your tests. Now, for this question, describe how anhydrous copper 2 sulfate can be used to show that it contains water. Alright, so anhydrous copper 2 sulfate, this is a fairly simple one. If you want to show that it contains water, so your anhydrous copper 2 sulfate is a white powder. And if you add water, Notice that I'm not writing down, I'm just only trying to write down the point form. In exam, if it helps you, you can either write down the point form or you can write down full sentences, but you need to tell them exactly what you're doing. So if you add water to your anhydrous copper 2 sulfate, you will have blue copper 2 sulfate crystals. Okay? Or if you don't know how to write copper 2 sulfate crystals, you can simply write copper 2 sulfate in word and then crystals. But the idea here that you need to let them know is that anhydrous copper 2 sulfate is a white powder, but if you add water into it, it will have blue crystals. Now another question that is commonly asked before doing a flame test, why does the student needs to clean the platinum wire? Okay, so the student needs to clean the platinum wire. This usually carries around 2 marks. So the student needs to clean the platinum wire because first, to clear or to clean the platinum wire of any impurities. Alright, so you get 1 mark for mentioning this, but let's try to score another. Now the impurities, if you don't clean it, so that the impurities do not interfere with your flame color. Alright, so these are all very simple explanation. If you go to the lesson videos, you'll be able to answer them. Okay. Alright, another question is, describe a test to show that lithium carbonate contains lithium ions and carbonate ions. So when you see a question like this, know that they are asking you two things, okay? Which is lithium carbonate, right? It is simply what? Li2CO3. So it contains both Li and CO3 2 minus ions. So how are we going to do a test to show that it contains lithium ions and carbonate ions? Know that lithium is a positive ion, so try to write it down separately. For the cation, which is Li+, you can do a flame test. And if the flame test shows red flame, you know that your cation is lithium, so it contains lithium ions. And for the second one, which is our anion, CO3 2 minus, what we are going to do is first, we're going to bubble carbon dioxide. You're going to add dilute hydrochloric acid first to remove any impurities, and afterwards you will bubble your carbon dioxide gas through your calcium hydroxide, which is your lime water, and if it forms a white precipitate, you know that this is calcium carbonate. Your white precipitate will be calcium carbonate. If you know that you have a white precipitate, you know that you have your carbonate ions. Now, for this question, I forgot to mention that the teacher is adding lithium to water. Okay, so let's write down the equation. You're going to get lithium hydroxide plus hydrogen. Alright, explain the color of the litmus indicator after you add lithium to water and you're adding your litmus indicator into lithium hydroxide. So the thing that I want you guys to focus here is explain. So since lithium hydroxide is alkaline, it's going to change your red litmus, okay? It is going to change your red litmus paper into blue color. So you're going to get 1 mark for answering this, but you need to explain why. It is going to change into blue color because of the presence of OH minus ions, or you can say that the LiOH is an alkaline solution. but don't make a mistake of losing your marks by not explaining why something happens. Another question. Give a possible pH for the solution that forms when potassium reacts with water. For these questions, it's fairly simple. When potassium reacts with water, you're going to get potassium hydroxide plus hydrogen. Since it is an hydroxide, you know that it is alkali or alkaline. So it's a base, right? So your pH value, they are asking you any possible pH. So it could be anywhere between 8 and 14. So you can pick any number. You can say that it can be pH 9, pH 10, 11, 12, 13, or 14, or 8. Or you can simply say it could be anywhere between 8 and 14 as well. Now our last question. A student does 2 tests on a solution made from a white solid. The first test that he did was a flame test, and the second test he did was adding acidified silver nitrate solution. The table on the right side shows his results. Give the formula of the ion that produces the red flame. That's your first question. Name the cream precipitate is your second question. Identify the white solid, which is our first reactant or our starting material. Alright, so let's try to deduce what could be what. So when you do a flame test and it produces a red flame, the only possible cation or positive ion is Li plus, correct? So when you add acidified silver nitrate solution and it forms a cream precipitate, the only product that produces cream precipitate is silver bromide. Okay, so let's try to write down this. Give the formula of the ion that produces the red flame is simply lithium ion Li plus. Name the cream precipitate. The cream precipitate is silver bromide. Know that instead of cream precipitate, if it tells you white precipitate, your precipitate would be silver chloride. Okay, now if you have a, let's say, instead of cream, if you have a yellow precipitate, your precipitate would be what? Silver iodide. There's only a few to remember, so make sure that you remember those very well. Alright, but right now we know our cream precipitate already. Identify the white solid. So we want to know what is our initial white solid. So let's write down the equation. Let's see, we don't know what our white solid is. White solid plus, we're going to add acidified silver nitrate, right? AgNO3. And then we are going to end up with what? As we are producing cream precipitate, AgBr, and then something nitrate, NO3. Let's say we don't know what it is yet. But from the flame test, we already know that we're producing lithium, right? So it is simply going to be lithium. And we know that bromide ions are produced, so it must have bromide ion as your starting material. So lithium bromide plus silver nitrate will produce silver bromide and lithium nitrate. So your first starting white solid is lithium bromide. So as we go through this 5 or 6 questions, you will have noticed that it will require to think a lot and then use the knowledge that you have learned from your classes, okay? But it will require you to have deduction skills in order to answer them and get full marks. But they are not difficult at all once you start to practice more and then you learn what the colors and the observations are. So spend some time on this and I'm sure that you will do great with these questions. Now that is all, and I'll see you next time.